and come here today. Lord, there are many that were unable to make it today due to illness and surgeries and everything else. Lord, we thank you for the Holy Spirit that will interpret our innermost groanings, especially at times like this when there's just so many that things that are going on that it's hard to condense into a timely prayer. But Lord, I'd like to bring each one of these to you by name, and you know what their issues are and what to do to help them. We thank you for that. But we're praying for Bailey Atkins, Lisa Bass, Tanya Sides, Betty Bennett, Ed Cotrette, Ross and Alice Clinton, Ann Edwards, Helen Fernald, Claudia Lagans, the Lester family, the Hunter family, Tammy Ingram, Casey Jackson and family, Tanya Patterson, Karma Rye, Charlotte and Steve Stevens, Marge Treadwell, the Watson family, Aileen Weatherington, Shirley Weatherington, Barbara Wilson, and our deployed military, Brent DeFon, Zach Elsoner, Oliver Hunt, Ben Joseph, Charlie Morton, Fred Nettenville, Jeremy Price, and Walker Wilson. Lord, we also pray for Amanda Madden, that wasn't on our prayer list, yes, but will be, and for Ron Edwards and what they're going through. Lord, all of these names that I've brought to you this morning need your help in a specific manner, whether it be healing from sickness or medical concerns, treatments that they're going to be going through or have already gone through, and then the healing of those treatments, the surgeries that they've had, and the physical therapy that they'll be going through thereafter. Lord, we ask that you'll be with all the people that are in charge of their care, that are helping them, that are encouraging them, that they'll all be your hands and feet to keep them motivated and happy, Lord, and that their pain will be eased and they will not be in suffering. Lord, as we go into this class here today, pray that you're with us so that we could try to put aside the worldly things that are going on in our lives, that we may fully devote this time in learning your word and to take something from it that we could use in our daily walks, something that will help us, but also through us help others. We ask all this in Jesus' most holy name. Amen. All right, so there's a lot going on in the body, and prayers are needed, most definitely, and I'm sure I've missed a few, but the bulletin's a great resource to try to help you with your prayer life. And so we're going to be teaching, I'm going to be teaching today. I got a call from Ron. Well, it wasn't a call, it was a text. It was about 5:20 this morning. He says, John, I'm not feeling well. You could be able to fill in? So, well, of course. What are we teaching? No, he sent me everything that it is, but and we're still going through the book of Ephesians, and it's a wonderful book, and it gives us a lot to think about. And today I think we'll have some pretty good discussion and be able to get through it. So we're in lesson 12, chapter 6, and verses 1 through 9. So if Ron's feeling well next week, he'll finish us up in Ephesians with the last half of chapter 6. But I'm going to go ahead and read the first 4 verses, and then we'll get into some of these questions and have some conversation here. And I'll be reading from the Christian Standard Bible. It brings out a little bit more to our thoughts when we hear it in different versions sometimes. Opens our minds. So, children, obey your parents in the Lord, because this is right. honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may have a long life in the land. Fathers, do not stir up anger in your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So our first question is, why do children obey their parents?
Well, it's a command.
It's a command, yeah.
It's the right thing to do.
It is the right thing to do. So it says because it's right. And how are we to bring them up? Or how are our children supposed to obey us? So in the Lord. So according to God's will, our children should obey us. Now, and it's right. It's right for them. So we're going to get into that. And question 2, what is the meaning of the statement, honor the father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise? And Ron says, explain the commandment with promise. So do we know where the first time it was, where the commandment came from? So the first time it was used, right, is Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. So it's in the 10 Commandments. But it's the first of the 10 Commandments that had a promise. So if you read through them, you'll see that these are the commands. We could actually go there. Old Testament, Exodus. So it starts in verse 1. Then God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Do not have other gods beside me. So he tells, that's the first commandment, not to have other gods beside him. Do not make idols for yourself, whether in the shape of anything in the heavens or above, or the earth below, or the waters under the earth. Do not bow in worship to them, and do not serve them, for I am the Lord your God. I am a jealous God, bringing the consequences of the father's iniquities on the children, to the third or fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love and keep my commandments. Do not misuse the name or use the Lord's name in vain. Do not misuse the Lord's name. Do not misuse the name of the Lord your God, because the Lord will not leave anyone unpunished who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And then I'm going to skip down to verse 12. And then honor your father and your mother, so you may have a long life in the land of the Lord your God is giving you. So that's the first one. It's so that you may have a long life in the land. So he's promising the Israelites, you'll honor your mother and your father, and you'll have a long life in this land that you have been promised that you're going to receive. His next question is, what is the promise? In verse 3. So we know what the 10 Commandments say, that the promise was that they'll live long in the land. But what is the promise that's given to the Ephesians? So it may go well with you, right? So things will be well that, and that you may have a long life in the land. So in the Old Testament, the land they're talking about is where God promised them land, Israel land. But I think here in the New Testament, where he's talking to the Christians there, that will have a long life in eternity, again with Christ, with God. Now, how could it go? How could it go well for us? You know, if we're, you know, well, it's going to get into that, but you know, we've always been raised to honor our mother and father, to do what's right in the eyes of God. But Charlotte?
Well, if you follow your parents' instructions, and if it's sound, of course, then you're going to avoid some of the mistakes and pitfalls that your parents may have experienced and learned from. You can learn from their mistakes instead of having to make your own.
Right. So have you ever heard, for the younger ones, you know, your parents ever say, I told you so? But not really. They may not use those words. You know, nowadays I could hear myself saying, I give my kids some advice. They could take it or not. But when it turns up the opposite way, I'm going to try not to say, I told you so. We say, well, how do you like that guidance now? You know, it's you know, just different ways of doing it. But if you listen, and you realize, and all kids go through it, you know, well, you know, my parents, they're old. They don't know what they're talking about. But they kind of do, because they've already lived through it. Now, I know when somebody that's has more years than I do, and they give me some advice, I listen to it, because I know they've lived through it. I know that the advice they're given isn't just an opinion or something. It's something that they've gone through. So it would be wise of me to take heed of that and try to not make those same mistakes. But then I also learn from the kids sometimes as well, the younger ones, because they've got a different outlook on things. I have the outlook that was ingrained in me from my parents and everything, or even in the Marine Corps. This is the way it's supposed to be. Why? Because it's always been this way. Is there a better way? No, this is the way it's supposed to be. You know? If there was a better way, I would have told you. It's not. And then sometimes those young Marines or young people at work, or you know, even my own kids, well, you know, Dad, or when you're in inspection, then they say, well, this is how it's supposed to be done now. And you tell them, well, show me. Why? And they pull out the new orders. I'm like, man, that's, yeah, you're right. You know, it's kind of hard to do. But it's better for them. It'll go well with you if you obey your parents. You honor your parents, your father and your mother. And help them. And it also goes well both ways if you could help each other through it. So I like to tell people that I'm teaching and training at work and everywhere else, you know, you've never learned it all. You haven't learned it all. You might think that you have this job down pat, but you haven't learned everything. There's always something else that you can learn. You can learn from anyone. And I know the day I'm done learning, I'll be in glory, and I'll know everything I need to know. So, but until then, I've got lots to learn. All right. If it's open. The next question is, what is the Father's... Yes, I want to make sure I already read this. What is the Father's twofold responsibility to his children in verse 4? Don't stir up anger is the first one, right? Fathers, do not stir up anger in your children. And we can learn a lot from that. Because if you want the kids to, you know, respect you and honor you, you don't want to do things that are going to make them angry. Now, you may have to correct the children sometimes and Nobody likes to be corrected. But you're not going out and looking for something to make them angry. You're not trying to bring anger into them by stirring up anger. And the second responsibility is to bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So it's the father's responsibility to teach their children about the Lord, about his commandments, about the ways that he wants things, so that they will grow honoring their parents and learn. Does anybody have a comment on that? Charlotte?
I was just thinking that part of that responsibility was to help your children honor your spouse, your wife.
Right. Exactly.
Because when they get to a certain age, the dads are helpful in that.
So, right. And kids have role models, right? And then is their father the role model? Well, you would hope. You would hope they wouldn't have to go outside of the home to find a role model, somebody that they want to emulate, to become like, because they can't look up to their father. But that's our responsibility. And he's writing this to Christians, so we know that it's in the Christian household that we need to be that role model for our kids. We need to show our kids how to treat our wives, their mother, with honor and respect. That's where they're going to learn it. And then at the same time, when the wives are treating the husbands with that honor and respect, especially when they have daughters. I don't have any experience with daughters. I only have sons. So I hear boys are easy, so I've been blessed. But I don't know. I don't know if girls are easier. But at the same time, they're looking up to their mothers to see how their mothers are treating their fathers, but they're also looking up to their dads. They're looking up to their fathers to learn how a man should treat them when they're trying to find a husband. So it's very important role. It's, as Charlotte was saying, that we'll do that. All right, I'm going to read through verse 9 now. So this is going to be talking more about our relationships at work. Slaves, obey your human masters with fear and trembling, in the sincerity of your heart, as you would Christ. Do not work only while being watched as people pleasers, but as slaves of Christ, doing God's will from your heart. Serve with a good attitude as to the Lord and not to people, knowing that whatever good each one does, slave or free, he will receive this back from the Lord. And masters, treat your slaves the same way, without threatening them, because you know that both their master and yours is in heaven, and there is no favoritism with him. So, question 5, who actually bears the responsibility? Okay, so we didn't get out of the first part yet. I didn't read on, but this is, we kind of covered it. Who actually bears the responsibility for the children obeying their parents? And then explain your answer. So is it the parents' responsibility to teach their children to obey the parents? Or is it the father's responsibility? So in verse 4, the command was given to the fathers, right? Fathers, do not stir up anger in your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So a lot of people, there's a lot that think, hey, the mom's responsible for it. The mom's home with the kids a lot more probably, and they're going to do it. So it kind of becomes the parents, right? But ultimately, it's the father's responsibility to ensure that this happens. It's the head of the household. Christ is the head of the church, and the father is the head of the home. We need to, that it falls on us, and we need to take that as a duty, a responsibility. We got to make sure. That doesn't mean that we're doing all of it. We bring our children to church and they go to Bible study. But how much instruction are they really getting in the hour that they get? Maybe 2 hours on Sunday if they come for Bible study, and then they get specific teaching during the wee Bible hour. They're learning, but they're only learning a few hours out of a week, where they're home with us a lot more time. But now we also have to fight the world because they're in, public education. Not everybody can homeschool their children. That's a wonderful thing, but realistically, not everyone can do it, and we rely on public education. And we need to fight to make sure that public education isn't teaching the kids anything that they don't need to know. Or, not that they don't need to know, but is not correct, that is inaccurate. So we have a lot to fight when they come back. Larry?
Every time we read this verse, I think of what it talks about in Deuteronomy, about training up and educating your kids.
Yes.
When you're walking, when you're sitting down, when you're lying down.
Yep.
I think it was God's intentions from the beginning that it not be left up to somebody else,
That's right.
but that it be understood by the parents that it was their responsibility. And in our society today, with the expansion of child care, and with both parents having to work and being under the stressful circumstances that they often are, that we depend on the teachers at school, the child care workers, to bring the kids up and teach them the things that they need to know, not just academically, but socially, morally,
Right.
their values, to where I don't think God ever intended for that to be the way to go.
Yep. And that's why parents are under so much stress nowadays too, that because who wants to send their kids off to just anyone to teach them? You want to vet it first, right? You're going to ask a lot of questions. You're going to try to figure out what's going on there and everything before you let your kids go into those situations. And then when they come home, you always want to talk and have a discussion at the end of the day to try to find out what they were trying to process and bring it up. But it's our responsibility to ensure that our kids are honoring the father and mother through the teachings of Christ. Through, that's where it says in the instruction, it says, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So where do we learn it from? We have to learn it from the Bible. We got to give biblical teachings and references and things like that so that our kids could grow in strength when they're in the world. You can't just take them out of the world and expect the world never to get into them and try to shield them from the world. They have to be able to experience that, or when they grow older, they're not going to have those experiences to be able to battle that. So when they come to it as an adult and they don't know because they've never been, well, this is what I've always been taught. But when they see that in the world, and then they're talked to and taught why these things are happening, and, you know, they may appear to have a wonderful life, but they don't have anything to look forward to in the future, is one way that you could put it to your kids when you're teaching them to be remaining in the Lord and honoring your mother and father. Because what you want at the end is for them to go to paradise. And if they're being raised in the world and not be instructed in the Lord to combat the worldly ways, more than likely they're gonna go, the world's gonna win them over because they won't see it. That's the importance. That's why we've got to be the ones and to think of it when you think of your jobs and everything else, and you say, this is a responsibility given to me. What are we going to do with that? We're going to make sure it's done. We're going to make sure that it happens however we've got to do it. And we've been instructed, through the Word. God's given us the instruction. Fathers, we are to bring them up, bring up the children in the training and instruction of the Lord. So we've been given that responsibility. And I'm sorry, I need to mute my phone.
Larry mentioned Deuteronomy 5:16, and he's probably got that verse pulled up. It would be worthwhile if you read that verse, Larry. I'd read it myself, but I can't see good enough with these lights we got here.
I'll read it. Deuteronomy 5. Yeah, I missed that. Deuteronomy 5:16?
16.
All right. Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live long and so that you may prosper in the land of the Lord your God is giving you. Did that not change? Because that sounds like whatever. You got to love technology. Deuteronomy 5 and 16. Yeah, it didn't change. So it said Deuteronomy 5:16, but that wasn't Deuteronomy 5:16. 5:6. No, it is. Yeah, it is. Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live long and so that you may prosper in the land the Lord your God is giving you. So it's the same promise that is given you in 10 Commandments. It's the same promise that is being given to you in Ephesians, so that you may live long, you may prosper.
Now, the one that talks about the children specifically.
Yeah, that's a
in
different.
chapter 6 of Deuteronomy.
Okay, 6:16, Deuteronomy.
Starting with verse 7.
Right. This is what Larry was. That's why it was throwing me off. I'm like, I'm reading this, but this isn't right. This is what Larry was saying. So, Deuteronomy 6, starting in verse 7. I'm going to start in 6. These words that I give you today are to be in your heart. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them be a symbol on your forehead. So we're to teach our children constantly.
The mother has some responsibility there also. They get most of their teaching from their mother.
Yes.
The father has the responsibility. We understand
Right.
And hopefully he gets his spiritual training from his father and his mother, of course.
Now, I want to make sure I'm clear. I'm not saying that the mother has no, part in it. It's just that it's the father's responsibility to make sure that it's happening. Yes, Charlotte.
Well, the Lord was always having the Israelites put up monuments when they went across the Red Sea. They had different monuments, and it was to remind people of stuff. So you had what do they call it? A learning opportunity. So when you were walking around, you could either see something written on a building, or you could
Right.
see a monument, and the kid could say, "Hey, what's that?" And then that gave you an opportunity to explain.
Give them the meaning.
And that's why that in our society, when they run around knocking down statues because they don't like the personality of the statue, but that statue can teach a lesson because people say, well, why is that statue there? Whether the person was good, bad, or different. It's an opportunity to promote our heritage and our belief system down to our next.
Right. Russell?
If we look at this in context, so like the church of Ephesus, there were Jews and Gentiles, and in that time, the fathers or the husbands had absolute power over their families. They could do as they wished to the kids. They could send them to, sell them as slaves, put them in the fields. Same thing with the wives. The woman had no rights and stuff. So Paul writing this is like the first time that these individuals are hearing, hey,
Yeah.
children obey your fathers, even though he can send you to the field. Father, don't provoke your children to wrath. And so this is the first time that they're actually hearing this kind of statement that everyone treat each other in love and respect.
Right.
In that time, that just wasn't how the world operated.
That's right. Becky?
We're studying Colossians, the ladies' class, and if you go to Colossians 3, it actually gives instructions for Christian households there.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting to me about it is exactly what Russell was saying, is all these people were coming together in the church that had all different kinds of backgrounds. And they were basically having to be taught to live the Christ way.
Right.
And I think it was interesting, it says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord, but then it says, husbands, love your wives.
Yep.
I think there was at times, maybe in those days, and maybe still in these days, where there's a lack of love being shown. And so then it goes on, children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. And fathers, don't embitter your children because they'll become discouraged. All really good advice for all ages.
That's right. And it's, it was written to the Ephesians back then, but it is written to us as well. And we could look at it in our families now, in our homes now, and take it on as that responsibility. So as we get into, and this will make sense more here in this next part when we talk about our jobs and work and what we're to do. Because just like Russell said in context, he was talking to slaves, but nowadays we're not slaves to our masters or our employers, even though sometimes it may seem like it. But well, there's a lot of things, and even in the secular jobs, it could be kind of challenging too. But it's to teach us how to react, how to respond. You could insert employee and boss or whatever in there, hire. So in question 6, explain how we, wow, I guess I should have read more down because I think we covered this one too. So explain how we nurture our children spiritually. So we train them in the instruction of the Lord, and we do it by the mothers, the fathers. We do it with Sunday school. We do it with the church and when we get together, and it takes, sometimes they say it takes a whole church to raise a Christian, and it really does. All the examples that our kids see when they come to church and to the picnics and to just the things that we do as a congregation together, and they're learning from everyone, and they have, it's like I said, it's a great thing to be the role model for your children, but they have lots of role models, and they look up to a lot of the men that are in the congregation, and the girls look up to a lot of the ladies that are in the congregation, and it's important that we talk about things. If they see things that they don't understand, we let them know, and we ask others to help us do that at times. Sometimes we just can't get through to our own kids. Then we need another person to kind of step in and help. They might be able to say it in a different way that sinks in. Or that's not my old dad telling me something that he's just telling me to tell me. Someone else told me this thing in a little different way, and it makes sense to me. And then, okay, my dad's not as dumb as I thought. So usually we don't realize that until we're dads. But
There's always somebody watching you.
That's right.
If you don't believe that, just look right across the street. You think those kids and those people are not watching you over
Oh, yeah.
here? They are watching you.
They definitely are.
Yeah, they see you.
So question 7, the responsibility of servants or employees are given in verse 5 through 8. List as many responsibilities as you can from this text. So slaves, obey human masters. So we're to obey our employers. With fear and trembling. I can't look at myself right now obeying them with fear and trembling because of them. But if I'm doing something that's against God, that's where the fear and trembling is going to come in my mind, is I need to do what is expected of me because God expects me to do that. Not do something wrong, but,
I know Ron put employees in here,
Mhm.
but because at that time
There were slaves.
slaves, and I think that's who he's referring to. He's not referring to employees, be kind to we're supposed to be kind to everybody.
Right.
You get what you put out.
Yes, and what Ron's trying to do here also, and so am I, is to bring this text into our lives now and how it applies to us. Yes, in context, he was talking to the slaves.
Yeah, because not too long ago, we had slaves here in this country.
There's still slaves in the world.
There's still slaves in the world.
Yeah,
So-
and there's still slaves here in this country, whether we like to believe it or not, but
So it is
hopefully-
relevant today too, as using the word slaves and
Yeah.
servants.
but they're different.
In some ways, yes.
Yeah, they're different. The slaves that are kind of here today and stuff, some of these slaves weren't forced into slavery. They chose that
Right.
path. They chose that for
And some of
whatever.
them were bond servants in the fact that they were paying off a debt
Right. And then they would be released.
when they paid that
It-
debt off. Yeah.
Right.
Some were prisoners of war.
Yeah, there were, yeah. When the Israelites were enslaved,
Right.
they were to
Yeah,
do,
there are many different
there's many different,
aspects to
yeah.
servants.
So we want to look at that. You want to keep that in your mind, but okay. In sincerity of your heart, and as you would Christ. So we are to do what we're told, not just to their face. Oh yeah, sure, I got that. I'll take care of that. And I'm just saying it to make you feel good that I'm going to do something and I'm really not. All right, don't work only while being watched. This is a big one, right? And some of the in this age, I guess we could say, it's kind of hard to get away with not working when you're not being watched, because you're always being watched. We got cameras everywhere now. Oh, that's to watch, make sure we're not being stolen from. Actually, that's to make sure the employees are working. Why? Because if they're not, they're stealing from you. So in truth, it is. Russell?
In Colossians 4 writes, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the.
That's right.
It goes on and on. But I think that's also what he's trying to say to the Ephesians at the same time is with the fear and trembling, that's like having respect for those who are above you. Because when we're working, and I do this at work sometimes, being 21 years in the military, sometimes you just don't want to do what people tell you. But if every day you go to work thinking today I'm going to do my job for Jesus and not for this 06 or this 07, or
Right.
whatever, it gives you more motivation. You find that you are more sincere of heart when you're doing things that you're doing.
Yeah, we're supposed to go to work with the attitude, I'm going to do my very best today that I can to be pleasing to God. Not to be pleasing to my boss or for a possible promotion or for, something like that. I'm going to do the best I can to please God and no one else. That way, I won't let myself down, because if you're trying to please man, you're going to fail. You're not going to ever be able to do good enough for that person.
We're supposed to store up our treasures in heaven.
That's right. All right, serve with a good attitude as to the Lord and not to people, knowing that whatever good each one does, slave or free, he will receive this back from the Lord. So it just continues to tell us, how to work, how to be. It doesn't matter if we're under bondage and we have to do it, or we don't. We're doing this. We were hired there by choice. I went and looked for that job. For those slaves at that time, the same thing. They are maybe under bondage to pay off a debt, and they got to work off that debt. But they are to do it in a good manner and be willing to do it and do the very best. And then how are the masters to treat their servants? Or employers treat their employees, to bring it in now. They're supposed to treat them in the same way, with respect, without threatening them. So if we're doing things that they are asking us, then there doesn't need to be a threat, right? Hey, if you don't get this done, we're going to fire you. But back then, if you don't get this done, you're probably going to get a whole lot more than just fired. You may actually get burned or, anything, beat and all that. So look at the different ways from then to now. There's a difference, but at the same time, it's the same. And then what must a master keep in mind as he exercises the role of master or employer in verse 8? It's actually verse 9. But, and masters, treat your slaves with the same way without threatening them, because you know that both their master and yours, so our master and our employer's master is the same master. It's God. Your master and yours is in heaven, and there is no favoritism with him. So God doesn't have favorites. He's not looking at that. We're not to treat people badly. We're supposed to treat them well. If your employer treats you well, and this is written to Christians, so if you're not working with a Christian employer, don't expect him to have read and, be living his life in accordance with the Word. You're going to have bad days. But if we, as Christians working for a non-Christian, live our lives in the right way and do our very best, and that you never know when that's going to open an opportunity. Why do you do what you do? Well, this is why. And then it could open discussions and hopefully bring them into Christ. Any further comments before we close? All right, it is 3 minutes after, so 10:18, but we are finished, and I will see you in class. Unless Ron is sick, well, in worship. But if Ron's sick next week, I'll be here. If not, it'll be Ron.